Pacific Continental Bank, offering personalized business banking guidance to individuals and companies in Oregon. Pacific Continental.
Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer. On the NewsHour tonight, Ray Suarez explores the escalating legal argument over Elian Gonzalez, the 6-year-old Cuban boy. Margaret Warner provides snapshots from the Gore and Bradley presidential campaigns, and Paul Solomon gathers opinions at a gathering of economists. It all follows our summary of the news this Thursday.
The biggest obstacle to feeding the world is not the food supply, it's just politics. Who is dedicated to opening the borders to get food to the people who need it?
And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This program was also made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Attorney General Reno urged a quick resolution today in the dispute over a 6-year-old Cuban boy. She said it's vital for Elian Gonzalez to get on with his life. The U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Services said the boy must be returned to his father in Cuba. Reno urged his relatives in Miami to accept any federal court rulings in the matter. She said she wants to avoid creating a dramatic scene.
Let's not say that there is confrontation that will resolve it. Let us say that the court processes should take their course, and then let's see what happens. You don't go in and pick up little boys like that. You work through the issue, and then everybody sits down and figures out how we comply with the law.
We'll have more on this story right after the news summary. A Michigan boy who committed murder at age 11 was sentenced to juvenile detention today. Nathaniel Abraham will remain there until he turns 21, when he'll be released. He could have been sentenced as an adult, but the judge decided against it. He explained his decision at the sentencing hearing.
The option that best meets the needs of Nathaniel and the public is the juvenile system, and only the juvenile system. While there is no guarantee Nathaniel will be rehabilitated by age 21, when he must be released from the juvenile system, it is clear that 10 years should be sufficient to accomplish this goal.
The boy is now 13. He was convicted of second-degree murder for shooting an 18-year-old to death in Pontiac, Michigan, in 1997. The Environmental Protection Agency fined an oil pipeline company $35 million today. The agency said Koch Industries contaminated lakes and streams in 6 states. It's the largest civil penalty ever levied against a single company under the Clean Water Act. EPA Administrator Carol Browner said the company accepted the penalty to settle federal lawsuits against it. She spoke at a Washington news conference.
With today's settlement, Koch Industries commits itself to take actions that will prevent this from happening again. Their failure to invest in appropriate pollution prevention mechanisms led to this record fine and the millions of dollars that the company will now have to spend to bring their systems into compliance.
In economic news today, the Labor Department reported wholesale prices rose 0.3% in December. Wholesale inflation for all of 1999 was 3%. It was the largest jump in 9 years, fueled mostly by rising energy prices. Separately, the Commerce Department said retail sales rose 1.2% in December, with holiday shopping stronger than expected. The U.S. Treasury will buy back part of the national debt this year for the first time since 1972. Treasury Secretary Summers announced rules today for buying up to $30 billion worth of bonds from the public. He said the move would help keep interest rates down in the long run. The total federal debt is more than $5 trillion. There will be twice as many Americans by the year 2100. That's what the Census Bureau said today. It predicted the U.S. population will jump from the current 275 million to 571 million. It said the median age will rise above 40, and the country will have larger proportions of minorities. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to the Elian Gonzalez case, Bradley and Gore campaign snapshots, and a meeting of economic minds. Ray Suarez has the Cuban boy story.
Briefly this week, the custody fight over 6-year-old Elian Gonzalez moved from the streets of Miami and Havana to the courts. On Monday, a Florida state judge issued a ruling aimed at postponing last week's decision of the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service that Gonzalez be reunited with his father in Cuba. Judge Rosa Rodriguez set March 6th as a hearing date on the future of the boy. He's been living with relatives in Miami since his rescue last November. The judge's ruling received an ecstatic welcome among Cuban Americans in Miami, who hoped it would thwart efforts by the Immigration and Naturalization Service to send the boy back to Cuba. But these demonstrations took place before it was revealed that an advisor to the boy's family, Armando Gutierrez, and his wife were paid nearly $70,000 for campaign services for the judge in 1998. Today at her weekly news briefing, U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno repeated her contention that the custody issue has to be resolved in federal, not state courts, and again backed the INS decision that Juan Gonzalez can alone determine where Elian lives.
I think the process that was used by INS is a fair, good process. We are just trying to make sure that people understand that what is at issue is a father who wants his son home and grandparents who want their grandson home. And these are bonds that should be honored.
Folks in Miami, though, of course, are saying that they don't intend to address an immigration issue. They want to look at the custody issue. And, of course, they say that is a province of the state court. Why doesn't the custody issue come first?
The issue at stake here for the federal government is U.S. immigration law, and that's governed by the federal court processes and federal law.
And to follow that up, is custody here irrelevant at this point in the proceeding when given the immigration status of this boy?
The custody circumstances are irrelevant to the federal process by which the federal law must determine who can speak for the boy in making immigration decisions.
Do you think you are setting a good example for this little boy?
I think it's important that all of us act with the best of goodwill and act like we would want others to act around us. And act like if you had a 6-year-old boy, how you'd like adults to act around him.
Hey, I mean, we've talked about a lot of sensitive issues, and I don't think I've seen you as agitated as you are about this little boy. I mean, do you think people are acting with goodwill, or is this just a political game?
I don't ascribe bad motives to people. I know a lot of the people involved. I know they feel very, very deeply. I just think it's time for all of us to come together and say, let us solve the case, and let us make the decision. And what INS has said is that for immigration purposes and federal law, the father should speak for the boy.
One of the understanding of what the boy himself wants to do, whether he wants to stay or whether he wants to go, and is that relevant in this case, what he wants?
I think a 6-year-old boy, can you remember when you were 6? There were some days I wanted to run away from home, and there were other days I wanted my mommy so bad I couldn't stand it. And just remember what it was like when you were 6, or try to. And I think you will understand what the range of emotions of a child are. And I think the law has indicated, and it's certainly, I think, the experience of most people, that 6 years old is too young to speak for themselves.
Reno said she hopes a decision about the boy's future can be worked out with his Cuban and American families.
And for more on the legal fight, we turn to Jose Garcia Pedrosa, a lawyer for Elian Gonzalez's family in Florida, and Bruce Boyer, supervisory attorney for Northwestern University's School of Law, Children and Family Justice Center. Mr. Garcia Pedrosa, how did this end up in a Florida family court?
Well, it ended up in a Florida family court because the Immigration Service decided on January the 5th that no one could speak for the boy, except the father in Cuba, on U.S. immigration matters. And we went to the state court for a simple reason, which I think has been, frankly, misrepresented. We didn't go there to administer federal immigration laws. That would have been improper. We went there to seek a temporary custody so that the boy's papers could be filed with INS and decided on the merits.
Well, is there someone who legally can stand in a Florida court and, according to the family law of Florida, say, I have standing to speak for this boy?
INS used to think so. I mean, the irony of what's going on is the original position of immigration on December 1st in a written press release was the correct position. This is a custody dispute for the state courts to decide based on a single standard. What is in the best interest of the boy? 6 days later, on December the 7th, the government did a complete about-face, made this a federal immigration matter exclusively. You heard the Attorney General's position, and frankly won't even permit in the immigration forum for both sides to be heard. We think that's wrong. That's not the way we resolve disputes in this country, and we want the opportunity to have both sides heard.
Bruce Boyer, once the INS has made its ruling in this case, is there a distinction that's legally relevant to be made here between the views of a Florida court about custody and the views of a federal agency about where this boy belongs?
Well, I think both the INS and the Florida State Court, first of all, are trying to deal initially with the same question, which is, as you put it, who gets to speak for this child? There are somewhat different purposes, but in the end it comes down to deciding who has the right to say where this child is going to go. The Florida State Court has stepped in and issued a temporary custody order, and I think that the central question there is whether or not, as you put it, anyone has a right to come into state court, anyone has standing to come into state court and claim that they should now be given the right somehow to speak for this child, whether that's in the context of applying for residency in the United States or some other context. And I think that's where the greatest problem lies with what's happened in the state court system.
Well, does there exist a difference in law between the standing of a father versus a grandmother versus an uncle or an aunt?
Absolutely, and this is true in every state. It's an issue that was just in front of our U.S. Supreme Court yesterday, and it's a matter that in the first instance is governed by state law. Here you have a law that is very clear in speaking to who has the right to come into court and to ask that they be given temporary legal custody of a child. The state law in Florida is very specific. It includes a number of designated relationships with the child, and as far as I understand, none of the people in Florida meet that definition.
Mr. Garcia-Pedrosa, your response?
Not so. Chapter 751, which is a temporary custody statute geared to doing specific things, in this instance, presenting papers to INS, specifically lists the kinds of relatives that may be appointed guardians. What we have here is a flip-flop by INS away from a state court custody proceeding in which the only standard is the best interest of the boy, going to a federal immigration forum where all kinds of political interference has been allowed to take place, which has nothing to do with what I still believe is the central issue and should be the sole guiding principle here, which is what is in the best interest of this minor boy.
Well, if in other situations, ones that don't involve foreign nations, especially foreign nations with which the United States has no diplomatic relations, would a father who is not demonstrably unfit have this kind of trouble in maintaining custodial care of his child?
Well, remember that the irony of this situation is that the custody of the father has been taken over by the Cuban government. We have no way of knowing whether the father is expressing his true wishes. This is a man whom the government has physically removed from his home. He now lives in a government house with his family. He no longer works. The government is taking care of him. And whenever he goes anywhere, he is, shall we say, escorted by 4 government agents. So the nature of the consent or the nature of the wishes of the father is very much an issue in what is in Cuba a highly ideological, totalitarian, rigid state.
Well, Bruce Boyer, a lot of legal experts have made this sound very cut and dried, but doesn't the state of American relations with Cuba make this that much more complicated a case?
I think it really only complicates the case because of the difficulties in understanding the relationship between the state court system and INS. As far as the central questions, though, I really don't think it's complicated. There are a lot of people here who are arguing that the courts, whether it's INS or the state court system or some part of the government system, should make a judgment about what's in the best interest of this child. But really what all of this boils down to me, goes back to the question of who speaks for the child. And nobody has a right to impose their will, whether it's a judge or an extended family member or somebody from INS, as to what's in the interest of the child, to take that right away from the parent, unless there is first some showing that the parent is not fit. And those are principles that apply here, I think, across the board.
Word has come from the office of Senator Jesse Helms of North Carolina that he's considering introducing a bill which would make Elian Gonzalez a United States citizen. Bruce Boyer, does that complicate matters?
It certainly does. It complicates matters because Attorney General Reno has indicated that while she'd like to see this resolved, she's not going to take steps immediately to enforce whatever measures she might take to have the boy returned to Cuba. What that means is that because of the delay, Congress may step in and pass a bill or attempt to pass a bill that would grant either residence or citizenship to Elian. The effect of that would essentially be to take out of the hands of the INS responsibility for determining the boy's fate. And then I'm afraid it would be up to Mr. Gonzalez to come to the United States to stake his claim.
Mr. Garcia Pedrosa, what about that possibility?
We would welcome any attempt to take away from INS, which has been so inconsistent and frankly unfair, this matter. We agree with INS's original position, and what Professor Boyer just said, I certainly agree with. If this were treated as an as a family court custody dispute, the father could come. No one has suggested that his rights should be violated or that he should not be heard. The expertise lies in the family courts. The father's side would be heard, our side would be heard, and an impartial person who is trained and has experience in these matters would make a decision based on what's in the best interest of the boy. Now, what in the world could be wrong with that? That's the way we resolve issues in this country, not with these artifices about standing and the right to be heard and so forth that only block the presentation of one side of the issue.
Well, in many state courts, family courts involving matters of custody or where children are going to be raised, that neutral person that you speak of is appointed by the county government, a guardian ad litem, who isn't one of the warring sides in this matter, who is in effect the minor's lawyer. Has someone like that been appointed in Dade County?
The state court judge's order also provides, the answer is yes, for the appointment of a guardian ad litem. That hasn't actually happened, but the judge has ruled that that should happen and that that will happen.
Bruce Boyer?
Well, I think there's a great deal of concern that Mr. Gonzalez would understandably have about the state court system. The statute that's been applied here to grant temporary custody, in addition to the question of standing, which I do think it's an important question because that's what protects any parent from having to go into court and defend their right in the first place unless they really aren't taking care of their child. But beyond that, the statute that has been applied here says that you don't assign temporary custody to a family member unless you have clear and convincing evidence of the parent's unfitness. That's the same standard our Supreme Court has said applies to permanently terminate parental rights. So you have a state court judge who has already decided that there is enough to go on to justify permanently ending the legal relationship between Elian and his father. If I were in the shoes of Mr. Gonzalez, I would certainly be skeptical about the ability of the Florida state court system to be fair and even-handed.
But should he be here or a representative of his be in the United States at this moment, in your view?
I think it's disturbing that it seems increasingly that he's going to have to come here or find a representative to speak on his behalf in order to try and vindicate his rights and to pursue his relationship with his son. It's unfortunate that it looks like that should have to happen, but if in fact the INS loses its right to speak to what happens to this boy as a consequence of an award of residency or citizenship, then I think Mr. Gonzalez probably would have to find a voice here in the United States.
Mr. Garcia Pedrosa, you heard Janet Reno earlier say that nobody wants to see the boy seized. In effect, the way things stand now, I guess the INS has the power, if it so chooses, to send immigration officers to take him. But nobody on either side seems to want to see that happen. Is that in effect, what the family can count on now to get some breathing space?
Oh, absolutely not. I hope that we don't get to that point at all. If there's due process observed, frankly, if we go back to that state court custody proceeding, that I don't understand why anyone would fear, because that's where the expertise lies and that's where the best interest of the boy will be determined. I believe that the family, and I certainly do myself as an officer of the court, we would abide by the final outcome. That's not the issue. The issue here at this moment is that through this artifice of denying standing to anyone but the father in Cuba, whose freedom is very much in question, only one side is being heard, and that's not the American way of doing things. That's not the legal way of doing things.
And where do you see this, how long do you see this taking to wrap up? It's said that you've bought time by heading into the state court.
No, we only headed into the state court because Mrs. Meisner ruled on January 5th for the first time that the same uncle to whom they delivered the boy, and they were thrilled to do that when the boy was released from the hospital. They were delighted, INS was. That same man who took this boy into his home with his family, who got him a scholarship at a local private school, who was giving him the love and affection that I think everybody can see on television reports, now they won't even let him speak. And that's why we went into state court, to gain legal standing, to present papers so that immigration will rule on those papers on the merits, which it still refuses to do.
Mr. Garcia-Petroza, Bruce Boyer, thank you both.
Thank you. Still to come on the NewsHour tonight, a presidential campaign update and how the pros view the economy. Now another in our series of snapshots from the presidential nomination campaigns, and to Margaret Warner.
Tonight, the Democratic contest in Iowa, where this year's first presidential caucuses will take place just 11 days from now. Vice President Gore and former Senator Bill Bradley held their first Iowa debate last weekend, and they've stepped up their campaigning all across the state in these final days. We caught up with Bradley on Monday at a town meeting in Boone.
You know, when you run for president, I think it's very important that you be modest about running for president, because you're only one person, and it's the most powerful office in the world. At the same time, I think you have to have confidence, that you are confident that you can be the president, that you can lead this country in a world that's still dangerous. And so what you have to do is you have to try to find a balance between modesty and confidence that will allow you to gain people's trust. Because ultimately, that's what this election process is about. It's about gaining your trust and your support. And the way I look at this, if you're running for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States, that you ought to tackle the big questions, not the small questions. You ought to have the courage of your convictions. You ought to be honest enough with the American people to let them know what we need to do if we are going to make sure we have access to affordable, quality health care for all Americans. Now, you ask me, do you want someone as president who's going to be a bold leader, or do you want somebody as president who's going to sit there and move around little blocks on a page, on a table? Because what is the objective here? The objective isn't just insurance. The objective is better health for all Americans, which means prevention, early intervention, which means drugs for Medicare recipients, which means having people have access when they need that access. So when I think about all this, I think, well, what's stopping us from having this happening? Why can't we get this done? And I think, well, one of the reasons is nobody is out there saying we're going to do this. So I'm deciding, I'm going to say, we're going to do this. But what else stops people? I think what stops people is money and politics. That's why everywhere I go in this campaign, I talk about campaign finance reform. The need to have public financing of elections so that the public provides the money and not the special interests. How much would that cost? Well, every year we spend $900 million promoting democracy abroad. Some of that's pretty good. For about the same amount of money, we could totally take the special interest out of democracy at home. In a budget of $1.7, $1.8 trillion, you'd never find a better investment of your taxpayer dollars than that $1 billion to make sure that no special interests would be influencing the legislative process by contributing money to political campaigns. It would be the best single investment that could ever be made. I want to thank you very much. If you wanted to ask some questions, I'll be pleased to ask them. Thank you very much. Yes.
Senator, what is your stand on increasing or decreasing the Pentagon budget?
Okay, the question was, what is my position on increasing or decreasing the Pentagon budget? I think that we can have a steady state budget and achieve our objectives if we make some hard choices. We're moving from a time where we had a Cold War budget to where we now have to be organized against new threats that are out there. And I think that means that we have to let go of certain weapon systems and reorient expenditures toward the new threats. At the same time, we have to keep motivated, talented people in the military at a time where the economy is growing very rapidly and there's a strong pull for that talent in the private economy. So I think that we can do this with a steady state budget. I mean, this is one of the differences between Al Gore and me. That's one of the differences. And that he wants to increase defense spending by about $127 billion. And I say we can do it with a steady state budget. I know that you are working with priorities, and I think it's a great effort, and I applaud you for that. I'm not where you are in terms of cutting the defense budget, but I'm better than my opponent in this race, so consider that. Yes.
I wanted to know if you supported the 96 Farm Bill.
I voted for it. I voted for it because they said there was going to be a safety net. When President Clinton signed the law, he said, next year I'll be sending a safety net provision so that if the bottom falls out, family farmers won't be in the bottom with, won't be gone. No safety net provision. None whatsoever. So I've begun to make this an issue in the campaign. I've begun to say for Al Gore to criticize some vote I made in the United States Senate on farms 15 years ago and then come out here and pose as if he's the defender of family farmers, it's an administration that has done nothing, is to insult the intelligence of family farmers. And so I've said it very clearly. What would I do? I would first of all use the antitrust department to go after the big packers. Second of all, what I would do is I would put more acres in the conservation reserve program. Good environmental policy, good farm policy. Free up some land, prevent erosion. Third thing I'd do is I think we have to help our farmers, our family farmers, by getting income to them in situations when prices drop in relation to their costs. I can guarantee you that I'm going to do that. And those people that argue, well, the family farm should go, they don't have the time of day with me. Because I've met too many people that have touched me too deeply over the last year. That's what an Iowa caucus is all about, is to give candidates for office who've never had the experience to have that experience, and once they do, they are indelibly imprinted, as I have, with the plight of the family farmer.
On Wednesday, Vice President Gore was at a college in Cedar Rapids for a town meeting with an audience of mostly undecided voters.
I believe that keeping our economy strong is one of the keys to giving us the best chance to deal with health care and education and cleaning up the environment, job training, and the other challenges that we face. And I think that one of the issues in the campaign here is who has the experience to have the best chance in avoiding some of the blunders that sometimes in the past have caused us to have unnecessary recessions. If we blow the surplus, for example, on the kind of extravagant, risky tax scheme that all of the Republican nominees are supporting in one form or another, that could raise interest rates and cause the loss of this favorable set of economic circumstances that's been working for us so well these last 7 years. Similarly, Senator Bradley's proposal on health care spending, because it devotes 2/3 of the money to those who already have health insurance, ends up being so expensive that many independent analysts say it would completely use up the entire surplus without dedicating money to the Medicare fund, which is being rapidly depleted because of the aging of our population and the impending doubling of the Medicare population over the next 25 to 30 years. Now, these and other issues, therefore, should be seen in the context of how we can be good stewards of America's economy. I believe that keeping the budget balanced and indeed keeping surpluses and in effect continuing to pay down the debt is good for progressive causes, because it continues to generate the economic strength of the resources and the public support for well-targeted initiatives that help us to improve the quality of life in America and solve the problems that have been neglected for too long. That's my basic approach, and there is a contrast between my vision of the presidency and Senator Bradley's. Let me throw it open to your comments and questions, and whoever would like to go first, feel free to speak up.
I really appreciate the accomplishments of the Gore-Clinton administration.
Sometimes referred to as the Clinton-Gore administration.
Right. However, my concern is not the issues. I also have a great deal of respect for Bill Bradley, which is why I'm undecided. My concern is that the next president be one of you two. And so I think the Democrats need to nominate somebody that can win the election. And I'm concerned that your ability to win the election is reduced by your association with the Clinton scandal.
My relationship with President Clinton has basically 4 aspects to it. And one of them is he's my friend. I have worked closely with him. It has been a privilege to help him lead this country. And in the process, we have become genuinely good friends. The second aspect of my relationship to him is that I condemn his personal mistake. It was reprehensible. I do think that the remedy of removing him from office, pursued in a highly partisan way by the Republicans, was disproportionate to the offense that he committed. That doesn't make the offense any less reprehensible, but I condemned it before, I condemn it now. Third, I have been allied with President Clinton in fighting an awful lot of battles on behalf of the American people. And we've had some success in winning those battles. Fourth, I'm running for president on my own as who I am, with my vision and my agenda.
Would you accept Senator Bradley as your vice presidential candidate?
Here I am trying to get you to support me in the Iowa caucuses. And not until I succeed in that task will I be closer to earning the right to pick out a running mate. But let me say this about Senator Bradley as a person. I said it last Saturday in the debate here. I said it a week ago today in the debate in New Hampshire. I have deep and genuine respect for him as a person. We've served together. He is a good man. He is a decent man. He's a man of strong character. And no candidate should be judged harshly in the hottest part of the competition when the pressure is greatest to attack and say something negative. I know that that's not really the accurate measure of who he is as a person. He is an extremely capable, decent man.
Now, more on the Democrats' contest in Iowa from two Washington Post political reporters who've been on the road with the candidates all week. Mike Allen's been covering Senator Bradley, and Cece Connolly has been covering Vice President Gore. They're both in New Hampshire now because those two candidates are in New Hampshire. And Cece, you first. How do you assess what is the state of the Gore campaign in Iowa right now, 10 days out?
Well, Margaret, after spending most of the last 3 days there in the state, I would say that the Gore campaign feels much more confident about its prospects in Iowa than they did, say, 3 or 4 weeks ago. That's partially because they sent out perhaps the best operative in Democratic politics today, Michael Hooley, who has virtually moved to the state of Iowa to whip that organization into shape. The latest poll that came out this week shows Gore with about a 20-point lead there, so they're feeling much better. The one thing that I noticed still missing from the Gore campaign in recent days, while they're quite good at sort of the criticism and pointing out the weaknesses in Bradley's agenda, the vice president has yet to really sell himself.
And Mike, how do the Bradley folks see the state of their campaign right now in Iowa?
Margaret, the Bradley campaign is in the interesting position of trying to convince people how badly they're doing so that when the caucus results come in, everybody will be surprised and think that he's an insurgent. The Bradley campaign has opened a dozen offices throughout Iowa and is working hard on the tough job of trying to convince people that they should go out at 7 o'clock at night to one of these caucuses, which, unlike just going to the polls in a primary where you wait in line, check your ballot, and you're done, a caucus can go on for a couple hours. So most of the people who go are lifelong Democrats, and most of those people are going out for Al Gore. So the Bradley campaign is spending these weeks trying to convince new people that going to a caucus could be fun, and they're putting out videos explaining how it works and really making an effort to convince new people, even Republicans, to come out. The sheets that they give out at Bradley's appearances that show where caucuses are going to be held even tell Republicans how they can change their registration the day of the caucus to come and support Bill Bradley.
But now, Mike, staying with you for a minute, a number of the stories coming out of that debate on Saturday just used the same phrase to describe Bill Bradley, which was on the defensive, which has not been a phrase we've heard elsewhere. What happened in that debate?
Yeah, very much so. If you remember the picture book about Alexander, this has been Bill Bradley's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week. He's had a number of things go wrong, all in a space of a few days. And you're right, this was a campaign that was very sure-footed. It just kept getting attention for how surprisingly well it was doing, whether it was in money or support or elsewhere. In the debate, he was tripped up on an issue that he knew was going to be a problem, farming. Al Gore is from Tennessee, the third largest producer of tobacco in the country. Senator Bradley represented New Jersey, which is known for growing what? Turnpikes and cranberries. So he knew that this was not a naturally strong issue. But the vice president in the debate asked him about a vote that he had cast that the vice president said had denied flood relief to farmers. And instead of saying, well, it was a good idea, but a bad bill, which you can say about almost anything, Bradley really didn't provide any particular justification. He just sort of turned her back. So he spent all week trying to explain something that happened on Saturday instead of being able to push his own message about farming, which he has. He talks about how...
Yeah. All right, so Cece, the Gore folks must feel then that even if it strikes you as a little negative, it's working because it's got Bradley on the defensive rather than out there talking as much about his own agenda as he'd like to.
Yes, that's weak. That's right, Margaret. And, you know, we've been writing for months how it seems as if Al Gore just can't seem to catch a break in this presidential campaign, either by his own doing or Bill Clinton's or the fates. And finally this week, I think Al Gore got a little bit lucky with some of those Bradley missteps, Bradley being on the defensive, as you put it. But what we are seeing also is what many Democratic insiders expected would be both the strengths and weaknesses of Al Gore's presidential campaign in 2000. And by that I mean that they learned well from the Clinton operatives in 1992 who ran the war room and did what they called rapid response. This time around, the Gore camp calls it pre-buttal,
which means that they are already burying us in opposition research against Bill Bradley before some of the words have even come out of Bill Bradley's mouth. They have got computer programs loaded up with every Bradley vote under the sun, and they spit these things out faster than we can read them. But what is also the weakness here is you don't always hear Gore articulating in some sort of clear, coherent fashion why he wants to be president and what he would do.
Okay, now we did just hear him take this question about his connection with the president, his longtime association with the president. How much of a difficulty is that for him? How often does he have to deal with it?
He still gets questions like that fairly regularly on the campaign trail. Not as often, Margaret, as we might have seen, say, 3 or even 5 months ago. But the interesting thing that we saw in that clip from Coe College this week was that finally, after struggling for the better part of a year, Al Gore has come up with a response to that question. And he finally has figured out a way to say, he is my friend, but I did not like that behavior one bit.
Mike, you had an interesting story in the Post today about what you said. You said in Iowa, Bradley's style leaves some cold. And you seem to be suggesting that there was more to Bradley's difficulties than perhaps the fact he doesn't have a lot of institutional support, which you talked about earlier. What do you mean by that?
Right.
What are people telling you?
Yeah, the clip that you showed us at the beginning was tremendous because it really captured Bradley. When you heard him talking about the courage of your convictions, the sort of very high-minded but fairly low decibel rhetoric. And that's the reason for a lot of his support. You talk to both his donors and his supporters, and they talk about how they like somebody who brings sort of dignity and statesmanship to the presidency. The problem with that is that it does not tend to excite audiences, which is what you need in a caucus or a primary. This morning, Senator Bradley spoke here in Nashua, New Hampshire, and he was in a fairly large banquet room full of fairly liberal people, and he said, and we're going to ban Saturday night specials, and the room was silent. And you can't imagine that happening if the vice president were speaking. So Bradley's challenge is conveying his big ideas and somehow making them exciting.
But Cece, he is doing well in a lot of northeastern states, not just in New Hampshire, but as you pointed out, the polls in Iowa are very different. How do you explain Gore's apparent strength in Iowa? What's different about Iowa?
A couple of things are happening in Iowa, Margaret. As you well know, that's a caucus state, and as Mike talked about, people have to come out at night and spend several hours participating in that ritual. And that type of process favors the establishment candidates, in this case, the vice president, who, by the way, the last few days in Iowa was campaigning with Senator Harkin by his side, Senator Max Cleland of Georgia, who is a Vietnam War hero, campaigned with him as well in Iowa. They have all sorts of Democratic Party chairs, county chairs, mayors, state representatives, you name it, as well as just the other night in Iowa, the vice president held a private meeting with Senator Harkin and 17 different labor leaders. And he went around the room and asked each of those union folks how many bodies they could get out on the night of January 24th.
All right, Mike, but very quickly, I noticed that in the polls there's still a high number of undecideds. We saw Gore in front of an audience of undecideds. So how reliable do you think the polls really are?
Well, especially in Iowa, it's very hard because it's the number of people who go to caucuses is very small. You never know who those people are going to be, even less so than in primary.
All right, thank you both, Cece and Mike. Thanks.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret.
Finally tonight, how some pros see the economy. Our economics correspondent, Paul Salmon of WGBH Boston, reports.
That might be it, yeah.
Exhibitors setting up for the annual meeting of the American Economics Association, held this past weekend in Boston. We'd come here looking for confirmation of what we'd heard so much about this past year, the so-called new economy, a high-tech, high-octane era of unprecedented, recession-free, even millennial growth, governed by supposedly new rules, featuring low unemployment, low inflation, and prosperity as far as the eye can see, with, of course, the occasional obstacle en route. And indeed, the mood was upbeat.
How's the economy doing?
Very well.
You're thriving, are you personally?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
From brainy jobs to brawny ones, the story was the same.
How's the economy been for you?
It's been real good for me.
Yeah?
Yes.
Better than you expected?
Yes.
But when we asked the economists, almost none were willing to adopt the term new economy, not even the newest members of the profession.
I think by and large the economy is still the same. You know, GM is still manufacturing cars and Kraft is still manufacturing cheese and macaroni, and like, you know, you have a couple of Silicon Valley billionaires, but you know, by and large people are still doing the same types of things that they did 5 years ago.
If the pros mostly agreed that there was no new economy, they also reached consensus on the current one, that the boom of the 90s has been pretty amazing.
Well, I am surprised. I'm very surprised. 10 years ago, I don't think that we thought that at the beginning of this new millennium, we would say the United States still has the highest income per capita in the world. And for good reason, we shouldn't be upset if we were number 2 or number 3, but we're pretty ebullient and happy that we're still number 1.
Now, you'll be relieved to hear that, these being economists, there was disagreement over why the 90s boom happened in the first place. Arnold Harberger gave most of the credit to right-wing economic policies.
Our economy since the 1980s has gone through a whole series of deregulations and liberalizations. We're coming closer and closer to being a more true market economy than we were before.
A free market.
A freer market economy than we were before.
Michael Mirapol, on the other hand, claimed that the policies of leftist economists have been the key.
What we argued all the time is that you don't need to stop the economy when unemployment gets below 6%. You don't need to stop it when unemployment gets below 5%. And by the way, it doesn't hurt to raise the minimum wage. It doesn't hurt to have redistributionist tax policies. All 3 of those things are the main reason for the good economy we've had for the last 3 years.
So economists like Mirapol give the credit to active government policy, plus a Federal Reserve that didn't, as in the past, slow the economy when unemployment kept dropping. There was also a third reason given for the current boom, one you've heard before: technology.
We've had biotech, the computer technology, information technology. What's happening now is that technology is being used more in the marketplace to raise productivity.
John Taylor, Bob Dole's economic advisor in '96, thinks now, as he did then, that an economy driven by new technologies like the internet could grow an extra 1% a year, which may not sound like much, but would actually imply a new economy of sorts.
You can make the difference between doubling the income in a generation and just increasing by 25% or even smaller. So those small changes in growth rates have tremendous implications for Social Security, for our children. Huge difference.
Robert Gordon, however, a productivity expert, spoke for many here in thinking high-tech progress has actually been oversold. According to his studies, most productivity advances have been confined to the computer industry itself.
Every time I go to a convention, I walk down the hall, and I look to my left and I look to my right, and a human being is making a bed, not a robot, not R2-D2. There are so many jobs left in this economy that have to be done by human beings. And that's a basic reason why the computers have not revolutionized productivity.
To Gordon, the current economic boom is not due to freer markets or more active government or high tech, but an unusually stable economic environment brought on by the good fortune of low inflation.
The Asian crisis helped us because it made imports cheap, and that held down inflation. Until this year, oil prices were low, and that held down inflation. We had a medical care revolution, and that held down medical care inflation. And finally, they got rid of some inflation by remeasuring it and improving the measurements of inflation, thanks to some economists who told them to do that, and they did.
Now, since the Asian crisis seems to have passed and oil and medical prices are rising, Gordon's list makes one wonder if our luck isn't about to turn sour at long last. And indeed, several notables at the conference thought it might be. America's first Nobel laureate in economics, Paul Samuelson, for instance, raised the specter not of inflation, but instead of sudden and massive disinvestment in the U.S. economy.
We're a me generation. We're borrowing the savings of every nation in the world. We're controlling our inflation by the excess capacity of everybody in the world, and so we're piling up a big tab. Now, I may think we're too big to have a run on us. You may think that, but it's possible that God does not.
By run, Samuelson basically means foreign investors taking their money out of the economy, selling our bonds and stocks, thus driving them down in value.
The point is that the prosperity on Main Street, which is so patent and obvious and solid, begins to have another look when the money's going the other way.
In the meantime, the U.S. and perhaps much of the world economy is being propelled by consumer spending, spurred by the millionaire-making stock market. If there's a new economy, said Carl Case, somewhat sarcastically, this is it.
Probably the thing that sums it up the most is that my house painter won't come to work on my house because he's made $75,000 in the last year day trading.
So this is a new economy, a new world, and we're all incredibly prosperous, right?
Right.
You don't believe that?
No.
Do you think it's just going to come to a halt at some point or slow down?
One thing you can say about bubbles is that there's nothing in all of economic theory that predicts when they'll end or how high they'll go before they fall back to earth.
To many here, a fall was more a question of when than if. But to others, like this group pushing for minorities within economics, the reason there's no new economy is that we're still faced with so many problems from the old one, like persistent inequality. Not that there haven't been improvements here, too, Cecilia Conrad reported.
It has abated a little in the last 5 years in terms of slight drop-off in poverty rates, some indication of less inequality in family incomes. It's not that wages are going up necessarily for people at the bottom, but more of them are finding jobs, and in some cases multiple jobs at those low wages. So it's translated into an increase in income.
Yes, Willie Johnson concurred. Consumers feel better across the economic spectrum, but
if you take some objective measures of social welfare, not just how do you feel, but how do you live, we see no significant decrease in the number or proportion of children living in poverty. We also have continued concern about the number of children who have access to health care.
Moreover, according to Richard Santos,
in New Mexico, about half of the children that are being born into Medicaid or are delivered by Medicaid resources. Half, yeah. This notion that a rising tide raises all boats hasn't been the case. In our state of New Mexico, Walmart is the largest private sector employer now. And so we still continue to have 20% poverty rate for the state.
To William Darity, recent studies suggest this economy is still slowed down by the past rather than hitched to something brand new.
One of the interesting things that we're discovering in recent work that we're doing on discrimination, on disparities in education, is that these effects or differences carry over across generations. And so a gap that might exist that's between blacks and whites or between Latinos and other whites who are not Hispanic is something that can persist because of the adverse consequences for the more recent generation of the experiences of their parents and grandparents.
But despite such worries, for most it was an oh-so-buoyant economy here.
University of Albany, State University, New York.
With teaching jobs more plentiful than they've been in years, foreign students flocking to our shores to get their PhDs, and then jobs in the U.S. as economists. We thought we'd give the last word to Robert Gordon, the productivity maven, who thought the current expansion would continue for a while, but wasn't willing to predict a new economy, or anything long-term for that matter. Because, he said simply,
economists are lousy forecasters. We all stay in universities and leave it to people who we don't respect to make forecasts a year or 6 months ahead. They make the money, and we look backwards. We look at the past and try to understand the past. Serious economists don't try to forecast. Because you can't do it. Too many unexpected things happened. In the 70s, we had the oil shocks. Everything turned bad. None of that was expected. In the 90s, we had a whole bunch of things that turned good all at once. And that had not been predicted and expected. And couldn't have been. Most of it couldn't have been.
We couldn't have put it better ourselves.
Again, the major stories of this Thursday. Attorney General Reno urged a quick resolution in the dispute over a 6-year-old Cuban boy A Michigan boy who committed murder at the age of 11 was sentenced to juvenile detention until he's 21, and the Environmental Protection Agency fined an oil pipeline company $35 million for polluting waterways in 6 states. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening with Shields and G Go, among others. I'm Jim Lehrer. Thank you and good night.
Imagine a system that produces and distributes food and helps improve nutrition and health here and abroad. Who is building such a global network?
Helping people realize dreams, like dream houses, by helping them see all their accounts and assets together so they can make a plan. See how we earn it. Solomon Smith Barney.
And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This program was also made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Video cassettes of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer are available from PBS Video. Call 1-800-328-PBS-1.
This is PBS.
Funding for local broadcast of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by viewers like you. And by the following.
SAFE Corporation, managing the human and financial cost of workplace injuries. SAFE Corporation, on the job for Oregon.
Pacific Continental Bank, offering personalized business banking guidance to individuals and companies in Oregon. Pacific Continental.
The Oregon Story, a story of hard work, determination, creativity, and sometimes luck. The Oregon economy was built around the state's amazing natural resources. Now, Oregon Public Broadcasting tells the Oregon story in a continuing series on the cornerstones of our economy. January 11th, 12th, and 13th, OPB presents farming, tourism, and ports. If you work in Oregon, this is your story. Join us.
Almost heaven. His music was a love song to America. His life a celebration of all things wild and free.
Every aspect of nature was man's first inspiration.
Hear his last words, his last song, John Denver, Let This Be a Voice. A special tribute next time on Nature.
On OPB, Sunday at 8. Corporate members Elvis and Bonaparte Advertising, Willamette Week, and Downstream have made a major contribution to the Oregon Public Broadcasting Program Fund for Excellence. Additional funding has been provided by you, the contributing members of OPB.
Today, you have become teachers. In your hands,